Hey everybody, welcome back to the hangar deck. Wanted to give you update number 2 on the P3 build, and I have finished the joining of the two fuselage halves, and I've also joined the wing together, and now all I need to do is clean up the gaps and things like that. So this is the wing, obviously. And we have the forward engine nacelles mounted at this point now. There's some very small gaps that I'm should go ahead and fill with a little bit of putty. I kind of hesitant not to fill them with putty, because if my old XO ever found out that I didn't, well, I'd probably be in trouble. So anyway, got that done. And then on the fuselage, it calls for 3 ounces of weight in the nose of the fuselage, and that weight comes in about right here. And then I went ahead and put a little bit of weight in the nose cone too. And so it's pretty nose heavy, so it should set on its nose gear without any trouble at all. And then we'll go ahead and pull the tape off, because this is set for about 24 hours, so it's about as glued as it's going to get, providing it got glue on it. And I'll have to clean up this seam. There's a couple of areas where the seam can just be sanded, and that'll clean it up. And then there's a couple of areas where I'll have to put some putty in, and I'll show you those here in just a minute. If you're building this model, all the glass, all the windows actually go in near the final assembly point, so you don't have to worry about putting those in from the inside. The only tricky part is the sonobuoy array right here, the sonobuoy magazine, if you will. It drops in from the front, so you have to kind of put your finger inside the fuselage to help position this, and then hit it with some glue. And I don't know whether you can see up in there, you can kind of see the fishing weights on either side. I attached those with some Bob Smith 2-part epoxy. I've got a little boo-boo right here where the fuselage didn't butt up together very well. There's a little bit of a step right there, so I'll have to take care of that. And that shouldn't be too much trouble. I think if I put a little bit of glue, a little bit of Tamiya right in this seam, I can probably get that softened up enough where I can reposition it and make it okay. Then the nose landing gear well, along with the OTPI, drops in right here. OTPI stands for on top position indicator, and it was a little device that set right in here that the batteries were also right above this too. And when they overflew a sonobuoy, it told them when they had overflown it. It's kind of like if you ever watched like a spy movie where they put a GPS locator or a beeper or something on the bad guy's car, and then they followed it, and it told them when they got real close to it. That's basically how the OTPI worked. A little history for me, I can't remember exactly how it worked, but right above the OTPI was the battery rack, and it kind of looked like a chair. And you could crank that battery rack out, and there was a 24-volt battery on there. And they had gotten kind of worn and corroded looking and kind of nasty looking. So one of my jobs when I was in corrosion was we took those battery holders out. I took them over to another hangar, which was probably the AIMD hangar, and I used a walnut blaster, which is like a sand blaster, except it uses walnut shells. And I cleaned all the old paint off of those racks, doped them in allodyne, which found out years later is highly toxic, but I always use rubber gloves, so I was glad about that. primed it, which we use zinc chromate primer, and then hit it with gloss white. And for those of you that don't know, back in the day when we painted P3s, we used gloss white and light gull gray gloss epoxy polyamide paint. So what is epoxy polyamide paint? Epoxy polyamide paint is an epoxy paint that is a two-part paint. So you have the pigment, and then you have the accelerator, if you will, that you pour in and you mix the two, and then you have so much time to shoot it. It's a really great paint. It's a very hard paint, but it was better. It was easier to work with than, not necessarily better, but it was easier to work with than polyurethane, because polyurethane will not eat into itself. So if you were going to paint, if you sanded off an area on the fuselage that had some corrosion, and you're going to reshoot with polyurethane, you would have to actually tape to the next seam and then reshoot that whole area, because that polyurethane would not eat into the existing paint. And so it would just look exactly like what it was, a big splash of paint on the surface. Whereas with epoxy polyamide, you sand down the area, you clean it, you put a little iodine on it, you prime it, and then you hit it with the epoxy polyamide, and it actually ate into and it bit into, if you will, the existing paint. And then once it dried, you couldn't tell that it had ever been sanded and painted if you did a decent job. And we did really good. We had a Scotch-Brite fiber wheel that we would knock the paint off, where the corrosion was, sand it down so that it was smooth, so you had a nice feather edge, hit it with iodine and then water, and then after it dried, we hit it with primer, and then we painted. And the only thing that we ever taped off was like a transition area between the light gull gray gloss, which was on the bottom and on the wings, and the gloss white, which was up on the fuselage. So if we had a transition area, we would have to tape off that area, because that was a nice sharp line. And we'll talk more about the paint color, when I get ready to shoot the fuselage. Some of the things that I'm going to do that you might want to do on your P3 build, if you do a P3 build. So I've been trying to remember and talk about a C story with each one of these builds. And let's see. Let me tell you, since we have the windshield out, I'll tell you a little bit about this. This was a multifaceted windshield. There was a small window up here at the top, and then there was the large window on the side, and then there were windows in the front. Occasionally those would become, and they were laminated windows. They were probably about that thick. And occasionally those would become unlaminated, or they would get a hit, which didn't happen very often, or what have you, and it caused a problem and the window had to be replaced. So there were about, I don't know, 65 or 70, maybe 150 screws around a window to hold them. And so what we would do is we would make a template out of cardboard, and we would draw a picture of that window. And then when we took these screws out, we would put them in holes in that cardboard in the exact order they came out. Now, why would we do that? Well, the reason why we did that is when you pulled that metal trim off that held that window in place, and then you pulled the window out, and then you put the window back in, and you put the shims in to put it in the right position, there was sealer that went around that window, and then that trim went back on. If you didn't use that template, there was always a little bit of sealer at the end of each screw, but it was different lengths of sealer, just by luck of the chance. And if you didn't put those screws back in order, they wouldn't fit properly. So that was one of the little cheats that we did, putting them on a template. And we would literally pull one screw out, put it in, pull out the next screw. And then once we got all the screws in, then we would start tightening them in a star pattern back and forth all the way around the window until we got everything sucked down really nice and tight. And then we could pressurize the aircraft and make sure there were no pressure leaks or anything like that. So that's a little experience of what we did when we would work on these aircraft. You know, it was a pain back in the day, but compared with some of the things that I do in my daily life, it really was nothing. And it's funny, you know, when you're going through a situation, it seems kind of it seems like it's going to take a long time. Well, when you really got into it and started doing it, it really wasn't that bad. And I've often said this, and I've said this to other guys that were in my squadron that were in the Navy, and we had no idea really how good we had it. Yeah, we didn't make a lot of money, and some of us were even on food stamps in California because the pay was so bad. Maybe not that the pay was so bad, but the cost of living was so high. And but man, we had a time. We really did. I mean, we got to see a lot of great things, see a lot of great parts of the world. We weren't graying underway. We weren't on a ship. You know, we were almost always had land underneath of us unless we were flying somewhere. And I've got a picture on my phone, and it's got a picture of about 12 guys sitting on a beach, and they have their back to you, and they're looking out at the ocean, and it says, VP Navy, we're on deployment right now. So that's the way it was for us. Alrighty, that's it. That's all I have now. I might do another update on the fuselage and the wing when I get all that squared away. Otherwise, we'll go on and I'll give you an update after step 3 is completed or close to being completed. So on your way out of the hangar deck, be sure that you watch out for the prop arcs, mind the rotor blades, be careful of the intakes, and be careful of the jet blast. Have a great week, and be safe. Keep it in the legal limits. Okay? All right. We'll see you next time.